Says we're live.
Broadcast is live now. I'm live. Brendan is alive.
That's what we hear. Well, good evening. I think we're live. For those of you who are early tuning in, Dan and I are online, and tonight is Great Lakes Shipwrecks Live. So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes for people to join before we get going. If people want to make comments, let us know you're there by typing something on the comment screen, and we will get started here in just a minute after more people have had a chance to join. There, we got some people logging in.
There are live people here. Good. Yes, I was telling Brendan that every time I join, I get in and, hey, they've been talking for a while. What did I miss? So we're going to be talking for another minute or two till we get people on board, and then Brendan's going to do his thing.
And in addition to being a guest on the show tonight, Dan is also a big fan of the show and usually is watching. So he's a good guy to give feedback on this. So I appreciate that.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. We are broadcasting. That's right. Rick Mixter is on watching us, and Brock Johnson is. Welcome, guys. Good to see you.
Hey, guys.
So we've got a pretty good show lined up. Looks like we have 13 people already watching, Dan.
Oh,
I'm going to go ahead and kick things off, if that's all right. All right. Well, welcome, everybody, to another episode of Great Lakes Shipwrecks Live. We have a really good show in store for you tonight. A really fascinating guest who I've been wanting to get on the show for a long time, and after a number of technical hurdles and experiments with the internet, we've managed to pull it off. And Dan has now officially joined the high-speed data world. So welcome, Dan Fountain.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
A couple of housekeeping things. So many of you have noticed that I'm not holding the show every week. I probably will. I've been out every 2 weeks. I might accelerate it to every week, particularly because of the plague. You know, we're all kind of locked in. So guests are becoming easier to get. But I want to let you know who's coming up. So on the 18th, that's next week, we have a legendary figure in the Great Lakes shipwreck diving and social community. My guest will be none other than Kim Stabelfelt, one of the founders of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Research Foundation and the Ghost Ships Festival, and the current principal of trying to remember what he calls it, Great Lakes Underwater Archaeology. It's a really, really good group that Kim facilitates in Milwaukee. They go out with Jerry Geyer and they draw shipwreck sites off Milwaukee. And it's a really fun group. They bring in tons of new people. They have a great time when they do it. And Kim will tell us all about that, I'm sure, next week. So Kim Stabelfelt, somebody who I've known and worked with for many years, and really kind of a pillar in the diving community down in Milwaukee. And the week after that, we have another long-term kind of pioneer in the Great Lakes Shipwreck community. We have Dan Johnson. He'll be on the 26th of November. And Dan Johnson, many of you will recognize from Loves Park Scuba in Rockford, Illinois. And Dan is also the finder of the Kate Kelly and the Lumberman, and a real prodigious sort of maritime historian and wreck hunter. And his museum down there, if you haven't seen the Lockwood Pioneer Scuba Museum, he's got all the shipwreck artifacts from John Steele and from Gene Turner and Kent Bellrichard and many other pioneers in Great Lakes shipwreck diving. You've got to get down there to see it. So Dan Johnson will be with us, everybody. That's about all I think I have for housekeeping. I hope you can all join us for those shows. I may, do some of the shows every 2 weeks. And lastly, if anybody out there is doing really cool, innovative work in Great Lakes shipwrecks or maritime history, give me a holler. I'd like to have you on the show. Also, I'm thinking about doing a series where I invite people from different Great Lakes maritime museums who are interested in shipwrecks. to be on the show. I know I had Mark Sprang last year from Bowling Green, and he did just a great job. And I know Mark's watching, but I'd like to maybe get some representatives from some other museums and institutions to be on the show. So, give it some thought. Highlight your institution. I also had Kathy Green from the Wisconsin Maritime Museum. So, all right. So Dan, welcome to the show. And for those of you who don't know, Dan is a Youper, like me, and we met up there. Oh gosh, it must be 20, 25 years ago through Randy Beebe.
I don't want to count the years.
Yeah, really. I was a young kid when we met, and you were kind of a young man yourself, relatively speaking. Dan's at least 4 or 5 years older than me, for those of you that don't know.
At least that, yeah.
And, we were kind of introduced by Randy through our common interest in Keweenaw shipwrecks, and I guess we kind of hit it off from there and started working on a lot of things. And Dan had already done quite a lot, and when I met him, I was sort of a little odd. But back in those days, I was kind of an impetuous young man, and I was you'll remember, Dan. I was very I don't know I think impetuous is a good word.
Impetuous fits, yeah.
And I was kind of in awe of Dan, because he's written some books and he was kind of a well-known figure at the time. So Dan, you had already been around a long time before I met you. Can you tell me a little bit about, because I don't know this about you. How'd you get interested in this? Where'd you get interested in maritime history? How'd you start scuba diving? You must have been doing it at an early age up there, and an early period for scuba divers. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, it wasn't all that early when I started diving, but I was brought up in Ishpeming. That's up in the UP, for those of you, in case there's anybody who doesn't know. But we have a camp on Lake Superior over between Shot Point and Sand River. This would be about 15 miles east of Marquette. And over at Shot Point is something that we just knew as the wreck. In about 5-6 feet of water, 6-7 feet of water, is a remains of a shipwreck. And we'd go down there, and my dad would row us down there in a 8-foot boat, my brother and myself. We'd jump over the side and swim down to the wreck and touch it, and try to find little pieces of iron and shipwreck artifacts and so on. That kind of got me started. It wasn't until 1979 that I actually took up scuba diving. And interestingly enough, I took up scuba diving, went through my certification dives in October. At least a couple of the dives were done in an October snowstorm in Marquette Harbor. So I guess going to the tropics was not that high on my list. Although that was one of the next things that I did. Next spring, we decided to go and take a look at that wreck. I called up Fred Stonehouse. He had a book saying, okay, there's this wreck on the west side of Shot Point. That's the George Sherman. So I called him up and said, well, what's that wreck on the east side? He said, I don't know. Let's go look. So 40 years ago this past spring, I went diving with Fred Stonehouse, and he was one of my heroes at the time. He was a big man on the Great Lakes shipwreck diving. So that's pretty much what got me started. We went on from there, and although I've made quite a number of tropical trips, diving the shipwrecks of Lake Superior has still been my real passion.
So Dan, were you involved at all with the Marquette Underwater Preserve when they started that up? I know that was a long time ago as well.
Yeah, that was. I was one of the established divers by then, and we were involved in it. Marquette Underwater Preserve had a lot of support from Diver Down Scuba when Rob Schmidt had the dive shop in Marquette. He was really the driving force behind it. We had people from the community, people from the dive community, and yeah, we were out there putting buoys on. This was before you had to be a certified Coast Guard or whatever agency it is that oversees that now. They have a lot of requirements. There it was just people who were ready and willing to do volunteer work. So yeah, we did that for a number of years. When Rob got out of the dive shop business, the support for it really died at that point. And we haven't had an active preserve since then.
Yeah, same thing with the Keweenaw. I know I was involved fairly early in the Keweenaw Underwater Preserve, and like the UP preserves, there's just not enough dive shops, not enough dive boats to really keep the preserves going. It's unfortunate because there's some beautiful, beautiful shipwrecks up there. So Dan, go
I
ahead.
was going to say about the underwater preserves. The preserve is still there. The information is still there. It's just that they may or may not get buoyed, but the information and the locations of the wreck are there, and so the information still gets out to people. There isn't the charter boat presence that there might be in other places, but at least the information is there for the adventurous diver who wants to go out and see these things.
Yeah, definitely. So I've got a little question for you. We have a fellow Youper on there asking us. It's Rick Mixter. He was wondering if the Sherman is on the west or the east side of Shot Point. Do you know?
Well, that's a good question, because what we always, when we were kids, it was the wreck. Later on, read Fred's book, and he says that's George Sherman. Later on, doing my own shipwreck research, I find out that there is another vessel that went ashore there. I'm losing it here. Another shipwreck, very similar size, similar cargo. The Laurabelle, very similar size, both canalers. And we don't know for sure. This could actually be the remains of the Laurabelle. There could be more shipwreck there somewhere. We've never found anything, but it's one of these mysteries that someday somebody's going to come up and say, "Hey, what's that other shipwreck over there?" So anyway, this what we call the Sherman is on the west side.
Gotcha. I know what was it? It was just last year we had a young guy who watches our group here came out and they said, what's that wreck off Big Bay Point?"
Yeah,
we've been looking for that for years.
Yep. And with that as a stimulus, I went and looked, and yeah, you can see the pieces of the George Sherman in the shallow water over off the west east side, but not military east, the real east.
Yeah. So Dan, I know the preserve used to have the Henry B. Smith weekend, and that was the big holy grail, as I recall, back in those days. Were you ever involved in any of those efforts to find it with the Navy sub-hunter airplanes?
Yeah, I was marginally involved with that. Randy Beebe did the legwork on that and did a great job of getting in touch with the people, getting it organized, and they had the sub hunter. We had the P3 Orions come up and do some flying, and they didn't look in the right area and didn't cover exactly the right area. We had the USS Defender, which is a mine countermeasures vessel, come up and do some looking. And I think Randy was pretty much the driving force behind that also. And again, they looked in not really too much for the Henry B. Smith itself, but some other Marquette mysteries. And again, didn't come up with anything. So
Dan, obviously, you have written quite a few interesting books, and you're not just a shipwreck guy. Around the time I met you, you had co-written with Fred this wonderful book, Dangerous Coast, and it really got me excited. And I went over and started diving in that area. But you do a lot of other stuff. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your books?
Well, the two books you see of Flanking Dangerous Coast there are Michigan Gold. That came out in 1992, 93, I think it was. It was 1990, I guess. That was a labor of love. Again, growing up in the Upper Peninsula here in Ishpeming, I always heard about the old Ropes gold mine north of town, and didn't know a heck of a lot about it. At some point, I started doing some research on it. Boy, the more I learned, and just amassed a tremendous amount of information about it. And while I was going back to school as a non-traditional student, retreads we used to call ourselves at Northern Michigan, I had to do a technical report writing class. I said, well, I've already done the research on this, so I put it together into a report, a research paper. Did well on that, and eventually just kept adding to that, and then eventually massaged it into the shape of a book. And there's a diving tie-in there because I was out at Isle Royal, diving Isle Royal with Fred Stonehouse and Eric Smith. And Jim Marshall of Lake Superior Magazine comes along in his yacht, Skipper Sam. So he invites us aboard, and this is luxury at Isle Royal. There's 3 of us sleeping on a 22-foot boat, and kind of grubby, and beer supply is pretty low. We get aboard there, and he's mixing cocktails and passing them around. This was downtown Isle Royal. Anyway, I mentioned to Jim that I was interested in talking to somebody to publish this book, and he said, "Oh, send us a manuscript." So I sent it along, and about 2 years later, I get a call from his daughter, who had taken over the editing or publishing end of the business at that point, and she said, "We'd like your book." And they published it and sold something on the order of 9,000 copies.
Wow.
Yeah, a few years back now, I went through and said, okay, I've learned things since then, and we can update the book and also add the silver mining, because there was quite a couple of silver mining booms in the Upper Peninsula. So I added those in, expanded the book by a good 50%, and came up with Michigan Gold and Silver.
Very cool. It's interesting you mentioned Eric Smith because there's a tie-in with one of our future guests. Wouldn't guess. Nobody would guess this, but you know what I'm about to talk about. Dan Johnson, when he was looking for the lumberman, he knew it was out there, but he didn't have a side scan sonar. And back in those days, they were few and far between. And he hired Eric Smith to come down. And it was actually Eric Smith's sonar. Eric was the sonar operator that day when they ran over the lumberman. Little known fact for those of you who are both interested in UP and with Milwaukee wrecks, although I may be the only one.
Well, that's one of the things I like about both gold mining and shipwrecks, and there are certain tie-ins between them. I go there a little bit in the severance program, but there are so many connections between, okay, this vessel is towing that vessel and that one wrecked, and then that one wrecked, and then it was connected to such and such, and it's like an interconnecting web of disasters.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many tentacles out there. The histories, the lines overlap. And I know, Dan, you, when doing Dangerous Coast there was a lot of interest in pictured rock shipwrecks, I think, back at that time. Pat Labadie had written the Submerged Cultural Resources Unit report on it. And there was a lot of, I think, forgive me for saying, but there was a lot of misidentifications of the wrecks out there. And when you guys came out and did your book, I think it kind of was the definitive work. Can you tell me a little bit about your your work in Munising and at the Pictured Rocks and how you got interested in that?
Well, that was the place to dive when I got certified. We spent a lot of time down there in the early days. I'd get whatever kind of boat we could get our hands on. I didn't have a boat at the time. I was diving with some guys from K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base here, and they have an MWR office, Morale, Welfare, and Recreation, and they had boats for rent, or not for rent. They could just take them out and use them. So we'd be diving out of whatever was available that weekend. But mostly it was 14-foot aluminum skiffs with like a 5, 10, 15 horse motor on them. Eventually got my own boat and did a lot of diving down there. At that time, the Bible for that area was Munising Shipwrecks, Fred's early book. And so Dangerous Coast really is a rewrite of that. And Fred was living down in Flushing, Michigan. He was that's where his duty assignment had him. So, he asked me if I could help out with it, especially on the dive parts of it. I probably overstepped my bounds and did a whole lot of editing and rewriting and adding a lot of stuff to it. But just being familiar with the area really helped a lot.
Yeah, it's an excellent book, and if you can find a copy, I think it's out of print. Strongly recommend everybody pick up a copy of it because it really is a much better treatment. Over the years, there are a lot of those little hulls that poked out from around Sand Point, and we nobody knew what they were, and this book does a lot towards solving some of those mysteries. So, well, Dan, let's talk a little bit about the work we've done. When I first met you, we were really interested in the wrecks of the Keweenaw. I've lost my screen. Bear with me, guys. I'll get it back.
Yeah.
And,
just going back to Dangerous Coast, you mentioned that it's out of print.
Oh, go ahead.
The last I heard, the Shipwreck tourist, Pete Lindquist's glass bottom boat business in Munising had a printing run of that done for their sales. So it may be available at Shipwreck Tours.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, get a copy if you can. It's a really, really good book. Okay, we're back in business.
There we are.
Most of you know my story. I grew up here in the Copper Country. My dad's house was right here on the waterway, and Dan's been there. And so, I knew about some of these wrecks. I didn't know what they were, and I started taking fishing lures off of them when I was a young man, and I eventually got scuba certified, and I started to try to identify them, and that's how I met Dan. And Dan had already done a lot of work setting the record straight on wrecks. I remember for years at Eagle Harbor, the schooner on the bottom of the harbor, everyone said it was the Gazelle, but it's really the John L. Gross. And then there are a few others, like the Alfred P. Wright at the South Entry. Everyone originally called that the Charles H. Bradley. And I think, Dan, you did a lot up there to straighten those things out. What brought you up to the Keweenaw?
Well, again, you could go an hour from west or east of me, go to Munising, and did a lot of that. And the Keweenaw is only a couple hours the other direction, and got interested in that. Actually, some of the first diving I did up there, went up with Fred Stonehouse and Eric Smith. Fred was doing the research for his Keweenaw Shipwrecks book. So we went up there and met up with Brian Schultz, who had been diving that area for many, many years before I ever took up diving. And he showed us a lot. And the more you do it, the more you do it. And you make dives on things and say, okay, doesn't seem quite right to be such and such. A big help that I had was a guy named Ken Lafayette. He's famous for writing a book on charcoal iron in the Upper Peninsula. Ken died a couple years ago, but he leaves quite the legacy behind him because he was interested in all kinds of history, and he indexed a lot of this stuff. He would go through the mining journal, the local papers, and take notes on shipwrecks, iron making, whatever. So he has a fairly extensive shipwreck index, all on index cards. And going through that was how I learned about the John L. Gross, and then looked at the wreckage that was there and says, yeah, this looks like a schooner, not a side-wheel steamer. So we figured that's what it must be. So that's pretty much how it came about, was looking at things and, okay, it doesn't necessarily fit.
Gotcha. Where is the Lafayette Index, Dan, if somebody wanted to look at it?
Marquette Regional History Center has a copy of it. I think there is still a copy of it just in a file box in the research area, in the reference area at Peter White Library in Marquette.
Very cool.
I think it's still there.
Yeah, I've heard about it before. It, is sort of one of those things that had sort of legendary status. I've still never actually seen it, but mostly because a lot of the information now is available in other places. But I wanted to ask you, Dan, have you ever dived the Scotia off of Keweenaw Point, off the rocket launch pad? Ever been up there?
No, I was never on that wreck.
The reason I ask is that Rick Mixter and I are thinking about trying to get up there and dive in. It's really hard to get to because you've got to go off the end of 41 up to High Rock Bay there, and it's quite an awful drive. So I'll let you know how it turns out.
I think that gets a fair amount of traffic nowadays. So I think it's might be a lot better than it used to be.
Oh, yeah, I almost took out my suspension this year up there. It's the record floods at the Father's Day storm 2 years ago. Really ripped up and they were much nicer, is what I'm told. But so any other remembrances you care to share about the Keweenaw before we move on?
Oh boy, take a closer look at the map here. Not really. There's a couple of things I know up there that I'm not allowed to talk about.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of that. Divers tend to be secretive, and they may find something or find out a piece of information, and well, I can tell you, but you can't tell anybody. So I have
Yeah.
to remember that, not to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. Both you and I have that sort of problem, right? We find out about things and then we have to remember not to talk about them. But
Yep.
my best memory up there with you is I think I remember we were looking to see if we could find the Monticello. Those of you who might know about that the big early one of the early vessels on Lake Superior before the locks were built, and she wrecked by Red Ridge, along the big red sandstone cliffs here, and just to the left here, the Maplehurst at the north entry. And we found a debris field out there. We never did identify what it was, but those were cool dives. We think it may have been from when they clamshelled some of the big wrecks out of the north entry that had wrecked there around the turn of the century and just dumped their remains, or maybe it was the Monticello.
Yeah.
Project for a future day. Hey, Dan?
Yeah, a number of projects up there that I still want to pursue.
Yep, sounds good. All right. Well, let's move on. You, Dan, are one of the pioneers in side scan technology on the Great Lakes, as far as I'm concerned, particularly with homemade side scan technology. I remember looking with you for wrecks with the Dan scan back on the waterway, which, as I remember it, was just a regular old papergraph sonar with transducers mounted on a fish turned outward. And that blew my mind. I was so impressed with that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got the idea for that? And do you still do any of that kind of stuff?
Well, yeah, that's what the fish we're seeing there is probably the part of it from about the midway back. That's still the original Dan scan. Only a few repairs, new tail fins on it, a few things like that. But yeah, it wasn't a great leap to figure out how to do this. You go back to when Doc Edgerton more or less invented the side scan sonar. That's exactly what they did. They took a fish finder and turned the transducer off to the side, and I think they might have just had it on a pole. Figured, okay, we can see stuff on the bottom off to the side from this. So I did that, and first one had one transducer looking off to the side, and yeah, it would see stuff on the bottom. Didn't really paint a nice, pretty picture like you see with sonars nowadays. But it went through a few iterations, had several little, I think I had an array of like 4 transducers in line. The idea being that the longer the transducer is, the narrower the beam, so you get better detail of the bottom. And if you couldn't buy a transducer of the right shape, you can put a bunch of them side by side and simulate a long transducer. Eventually, actually, a few years ago, I built one. Took a whole bunch of fish finder transducers, used some nasty chemicals to get all the plastic coating off of them, get down to the piezoelectric elements, mounted them to an acoustic window, and built a fish, from the bottom up, right from the transducers up. And at that point, that's when I learned that there were these hull-mounted sonars. I had seen the hummingbirds, but I actually found out that Garmin had one that has a lower frequency, 260 kilohertz. And we'll be seeing it in a few minutes. You can see the comparison between a hull-mounted Garmin and a custom-made Great Lakes shipwreck hunting sonar. Realized that, okay, this Garmin far and away outperforms anything that I did with the home-built side scan sonar. So I ended up doing, that's what you're seeing here, is a Garmin transducer and a towfish. Connects up to it's under $1,000 now, well under $1,000 fish finder up on the dash, and get beautiful pictures. We'll be seeing some of those shortly.
So Dan, that's a big deal, because you started, and I think you were the one who started it. You started a real thing there. I have a Garmin with a homemade towfish. Ken Merriman, Jerry Eliason, I mean, Randy Beebe, it's all over the lakes. I bet you I know 20 people who have copied you now. And it's amazing. This Garmin unit for, $900 will, if you build it yourself, it can give you the results that a $100,000 Klein would have given you 25 years ago.
Yep.
1,250 feet aside, if you got the right conditions and no thermocline, well, you'll see Dan's images. It's amazing. How did you? What made you think to do it? To mount to get that hull transducer and put it on a fish? I mean, did you do it to get below the thermocline? Was that the idea?
No, not really, because I'm only using the existing 30-foot cable that comes on the transducer. I have not extended that. The main reason was I'm working from a 20-foot boat. It's an aluminum boat. It's lightweight. You get out in any kind of weather, and especially rocking motion side to side. If you had a hull-mounted transducer, you'd get a lousy picture. So I just put it on a towfish basically to decouple it from the hull motion. It just smooths out the motion of the transducer, so you can get out in rougher weather and still get decent pictures. I had seen one of these 260 kilohertz Garmin's in use when we went and found the Seaburns, and like I say, it blew me away. So yeah, I decided just to do that, and I figured, well, I'll try the 30-foot cable first. If I find that I need to get deeper, I can. But this really simplifies things because I throw it in and I don't worry about tight turns. I don't worry about hitting bottom. So it makes it easy.
Yeah, I'm so impressed with mine. I did buy the 30-foot extender, so I'm running a 60-foot cable, and I'll be honest with you, it doesn't do all that much to help. If the thermocline's there, it's there, and if it ain't, it ain't.
Yep.
Water's either warm or it's cold. But what a contribution, Dan! And so many wrecks have been found now with these Garmin units.
Yep.
It's amazing. The Pair Marquette 18 was found with one.
Yep. Yeah. Ken's had most of the shipwreck hunting he's done has been done with one variation or another of the Garmin. He has a towfish, and then Jerry Eliason has the deep diver that he encapsulates the entire thing inside a towfish, drops it down to as much as 800 feet. They're actually more or less running blind, other than what they can see with their topside unit. But they get some outstanding pictures of these very, very deep wrecks.
Yeah, very impressive stuff. So Dan, let's move on to some of the wrecks that you found. And I know, Dan, you're kind of a modest guy. You don't. A lot of people don't know that you've been a really successful wreck hunter. And for me, my money, the wreck that just blows me away every time I see the pictures is the Severns. And tell us a little bit about how you found it, and let's take a look at what it looks like.
Well, that was a lot of coincidences, really. Quite a few years back, I was looking through the Geologic Survey. They have a database of older lake charts, and this was one from the early 1900s. And I'm, these are very high resolution images available online. So I'm going around looking, basically scanning along the shoreline, and I see this notation here: wreck steamer Saffron. So I, of course, grab Dave Swayze. I grab Julius Wolf's books, looking through it. Never come up with the name. So I said, okay, I don't know what the heck this is. Just took a note of it, stuffed it away in a file somewhere. And several years later, I came across a reference to the J.S. Seaburns and sinking somewhere up off of Ishpeming. Suddenly, the little bell went off. Said, "Okay, Saffron Seaburns. This has got to be the same one."
Very cool.
So I actually pulled a permit with the Canadian government, and I think it was 2007, and had a permit to go up and look for it, but I never managed to put the expedition together. I still didn't have a good sonar. I wasn't really sure that I trusted the whatever version of the Dan scan that I had at that point. And so nothing ever came of it. Then in 2016, Ken Merriman was starting his retirement circumnavigation of the lakes. And he said, well, you want to go look for the Severns? And I said, yeah, let's go look, because we have an X right on the map there. It shows right where it is. So we went up there and using Jerry Eliason's sonar and Ken, Jerry, Craig Smith, and Nick Lynchen, and we went up there and we scanned the whole area where the X on the chart was, the shipwreck symbol, and of course it wasn't there. And Jerry said, well, I've got a little glimmer when we were making a turn. There might be something just to the north of the search area here. So on the first pass, we're going along and we see this on Jerry's sonar. And we dropped the drop camera on it. What's on the next slide? Is that okay? This is what sold me, what got me started on the Garmin's. This is a hull-mounted Garmin, just running normally, not doing anything special. And this is the picture he got with that, of that same shipwreck. And I realized, okay, this is as good a picture, or better, than this custom-made sonar. If I take that transducer, put it on a towfish, I'm going to have a wreck hunting tool. So, having found it, we dropped Jerry's drop camera on it, and next slide, let's see what's on there. Okay, wow. First pass. We're going along, and okay, here's bottom. Okay, here's some wreckage, little debris field. And we come up to the wreck, and here's the helm wheel leaning up against the starboard side of the wreck. So that was pretty exciting. And we got a few more passes with the drop camera and realized, okay, this thing's only in 155 feet of water. So the diver said, enough of this drop cam, we're going to go dive. And Ken Merriman was shooting his high-def video. Nick Lynchen had a GoPro. So we got quite a bit of footage on this, including some where they poked into the galley, which I think is on the next slide.
Yeah,
and this is a
mind-blowing picture. John
the following year. Yeah, none of this stuff has been touched. That wreck went down so slowly, so evenly, that the stuff is still there. There's piles of dishes that were part of the cargo. This is in the galley with the stuff still on the shelves. Unbelievable.
That's crazy. I've never seen anything like that. This picture has made the rounds. It's actually become a pretty famous picture. And every time I see it, I just can't believe that, well, of course, from being down here on the southern lakes now, we're so used to seeing the damn mussels all over everything. Are there other parts of the wreck that have stuff like this, Dan?
Yeah, the whole cargo area is intact. You can see quite a bit of the cargo. There are barrels and there's some crates that have burst open, and there's kind of these swollen masses of something in there. We finally figured out they were sides of salt pork, but that stuff is still in there. There's barrel provisions that have split open. The hoops rusted away, and then the barrels sprung open. I don't think anybody's ever dug into those to see exactly what was there, but this is especially the impressive part when they go in. And Ken was just able to get his camera into the galley. John Jansen, he and Scholes made a dive on there in 2017 where this picture came from, and they were able to actually get into the galley and get some beautiful footage of that. So wow. Yeah, that's impressive. I wish I were still diving to that kind of depth.
Yeah, that's right up there with the Judge Hart as far as those North Canadian wrecks as far with preservation and so then Dan, obviously Lake Superior only has so many shipwrecks, and a lot of them have been found, and as I understand it, you got lured to Lake Huron next.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly what got me started on looking for the for the Choctaw. Part of it was having dinner with David Trotter after Gales of November, as a matter of fact. Not Gales of November, Ghost Ships.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went out and had dinner and beers, and we were talking. and the Choctaw had come to my attention. I said, "This has got to be findable." So I did some research on that and kept saying, "Okay, if everything says it's 4 to 5 miles off the point there, Presque Isle." And group after group, hunter after hunter's gone and looked there and looked for it, and they didn't find it 4 or 5 miles off of Presque Isle. So I went back to the original sources. I was able to go to, read the newspaper sources, and that's what everybody said, 4 to 5 miles off the point. And then I said, okay, let's see what else I can find. And just doing lots and lots of online searching, I eventually found the U.S. and the Canadian. It was in a collision with a Canadian steamer called the Waconda, and they were both running full tilt in the fog, apparently, is what the findings were. And I found the Canadian court proceedings, and in that they had what course they were running, what time they had passed detour, and how many turns they were making, how many RPM, and what speed they were running, and what course they were on, the normal course. So I said, okay, this gives us a pretty good line. The only thing I didn't have was the time that the collision was. Eventually found the U.S. court proceedings, and that gave the exact time to the minute when the collision happened. I was able to put those together and put together like about I think it was 4x3 square nautical mile search grid, and took the new Garmin. I hadn't really used it for any serious wreck hunting. I hadn't looked for anything in the kind of depths we expected to see there, 200 to 300 feet, 200 to 400 even. So I took it out, and on the way out to the search pattern, we went past the Etruria and said, okay, yep, I can see it. Continued on out, which is in 300 feet. Went out looking for it, and we made 4 passes in our pattern, and on the 4th pass, this shows up on the sonar. We say, holy, what? We found the Choctaw, and we had celebratory beers, and went home and said, wow, we found the Choctaw. So come back about 2 weeks later, Ken Merriman happened to be in the area, so we met up with him, and Jerry Eliason brought his drop camera over there, and we dropped the camera on it, and this is from dives a little later, that we find out, after a few passes, that this isn't a steel steamer. This is a wooden steamer, and it turns out that this is the Ohio, the wreck of the Ohio. So
Wow.
Took a few more pictures of that. Go ahead. Yeah, this is the flybridge of the Ohio. Wondered for a long time what those cranks were. At least one of those is we know now is what's called a whistle pull. You're not just yanking on a cord to go all the way back to the stern. You have a little leverage there. You pull the crank to the side. That pulls a cable or a chain, which opens up the steam valve on the stack way at the stern.
Now, did you know the Ohio might be there, or was it supposed to be somewhere else potentially?
Oh, Kurt Fosberg was my partner on this dive, and he still kind of pokes me about this. We found this wreck, and I say, oh, man, we found the Choctaw. He says, are you sure it's the Choctaw? It could be something else. Nah, it's got to be the Choctaw. Nope, he was right. It was something else. We didn't know the Ohio was there.
Gotcha.
Once we got the pictures and said, okay, this is a wooden steamer. Got back to shore where he had internet connection. Looked up Dave Swayze's book. His database is all online, and just put in Presque Isle and wooden steamer, and came up with the Ohio in about 3 minutes. Said that's got to be the Ohio. Then we looked at a picture of it, and yeah, there's no question.
Very cool. How was the Ohio lost? Was it a collision, a storm? Do you know?
Yeah, it was in another collision with the. It was actually the Moonlight.
Oh.
Yeah, Charles Kershaw was towing the Moonlight. These are both vessels wrecked at Marquette at one point. Kershaw is still there. Moonlight was lost up in the Apostles. So there again, here's another one of those connections. Yeah, Kershaw was towing a couple of schooners. Moonlight was one of them. Moonlight and the Ironton, that's what it was. And Kershaw's engine broke down. They stopped, and they had to release the tow. Ironton was sailing on, pulling in the tow line, and ran right into the side of the Ohio. Big collision gash in there, which is pretty interesting to see.
I remember reading about it. I wrote the historical part of the National Register nomination for the Moonlight for the state of for Great Lakes Shipwreck Preservation Society. They had asked me to do it, and I recorded this accident, and I had forgotten about that the Moonlight sank the Ohio. Really fascinating wreck. And how deep is this one, Dan?
It's right around 300 feet. Both that and the Choctaw are in 300 feet, give or take 5.
Wow, those are some deep wrecks.
Yep. This is something that.
Go ahead.
This is on the engine of the Ohio, and this is a little known fact that nobody seems to be particularly interested in. But I figured you would know, because all the listings on it say it had a single cylinder, low pressure engine. And you come along and look at this, and this is standing up well above the main deck. And it's a small diameter, long stroke engine. And it's okay, this does not fit the description. Apparently, at some point after its construction, it was built early. This was an early steamer, 1872 or something like that, I believe. Sure. Very early propeller steamer. At some point, it was converted into a steeple compound. So that's the high pressure cylinder, and the existing engine became the low pressure cylinder for it.
Interesting. Yeah, I spent some time studying Great Lakes steam propulsion. I actually did a very unsuccessful presentation at Gales in November on the evolution of steam on the Great Lakes. But I remember looking at some of these. There aren't many of these on the Great Lakes, are there, Dan?
I don't know. This is the only one I've seen. I know there are a few of them around. I can't come up with the names off the top of my head, but I have seen other underwater photos of bits and pieces of steeple compounds.
Yeah, I have too, but there aren't very many good intact examples. This is quite an interesting thing. I've never seen one that looked quite like this, so really interesting find. Probably significant, for that reason alone.
Yep.
So you kept looking down there, it appears.
Yeah, once we realized that, okay, this is not the Choctaw, I said, well, I'm going to have to go continue to look for the Choctaw. And we had laid out a search grid there that I think was 3 by 4 miles, something on that order. And in addition to that, while I been doing a lot of analysis of remote sensing data, I guess it's no secret that it's magnetometer data, but the exact source of the data, the exact way that we process it, is still a trade secret, because it has found quite a number of shipwrecks, actually. But anyway, in looking at these, after seeing some steel wrecks in Lake Erie back in 2015, when we were out there with Mike Fletcher looking for the Marquette and Bessemer, I realized, okay, some of these little small anomalies are actually something. So I had like 4 or 5 anomalies that I said, okay, I don't think these are shipwrecks, but just maybe they are. And I had this one, there were like 4 or 5 of them in or just outside our search area where we were looking for the Choctaw. And I had them on the chart. So I'm running a north-south pass. I don't know if they're single-handed. I could not get anybody to come shipwreck hunting with me. They had, they had the kids, or they had to work, they had all these feeble excuses. So I'm out there single-handed. You can tell by the look of the water column, it's kind of rough out there. And I'm going along, and I finish the pass. Okay, I'm at the north end of the search area, and I say, well, there's an anomaly here. I'll go the extra 200 feet. And I get there, and I'm alongside the anomaly, and boom, this big target comes up on the right channel, just where the anomaly is. Turns out that was indeed the Choctaw. So
wow.
I think this is the first time I've told that story. I don't usually say that I cheated and went outside the search area. Yeah, it was 200 feet outside, maybe 300 feet, 250 to 300 feet outside of the search area that we had defined.
Not close enough for government work.
Close enough to find a shipwreck.
So
Yeah.
how'd you get down there to see it? Did you drop a camera, or what? How long did you have to wait to see to find out what it was?
Well, fortunately, Ken had gone over to Georgian Bay and was coming back over to Presque Isle area. So again, this is a few weeks later. We got together, Jerry's drop camera, and it went down and took many passes on it. It's really interesting trying to image a ship that's speared, lawn darted into the bottom with the stern about 50 feet off the bottom.
Wow.
Yeah. You're going along with the drop camera and you're seeing stuff on the bottom, and finally you realize, okay, we're under the wreck. You crank it up and it's dragging along the side, and just
Well, I know all about that from the PM-18.
Yep, you know what that's like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is actually a mosaic of half a dozen drop camera images just to get a little better picture than you can ever any diver could ever see. But yeah, this is the stern end of it, obviously. I think the next picture is taken by divers. Same place. This is what a diver sees.
Look at the angle it's on. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah,
it's turned upside down and then went down. I've never seen a ship speared into the bottom upside down. How did that happen?
Listening to reading the reports on it, it was struck on one side and it rocked back and forth as it was taken off water and turned over and went down nose first, and that's how it landed. It's about a third of the vessel is embedded in the lake bottom. It's slightly buckled. The bow went into the bottom at a pretty good angle, leaving the stern up in the air, and then the stern actually dropped down, buckling the hull until it was resting on the stern cabins. The stern cabins were made of steel rather than just wood. It was sort of taking after the whalebacks, where the cabins themselves were partially hull. So it actually buckled, bent down till it was resting on the stern cabins.
Wow! And so, how deep is it to hit the stern there? Do you know?
That would be about 260 or so.
Wow! So that's still a deep wreck. You get a lot of ambient light down there, apparently.
Yeah. The zebra mussels have done that for it.
Holy smokes. That's a great find. And so are both these available now to divers? Are there numbers out there now?
They've escaped to a certain extent. There are about 3 or 4 different charter operators who run in that area who do have the numbers for it. We had 3 divers who made a dive on it in we found it in 2017, 2018, I think it was, when the guys made the dives on it. Yeah, 2018. I think one of the charter operators took a few divers, including some big names in underwater photography and so on. I won't share it because it's too much information. But yeah, talk to the people who run dives in that area, because there are a few of them who do have the numbers.
So are these in the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary?
Oh yeah, they've taken over the whole north half of Lake Huron. So yeah, they are actually Choctaw's on the National Register of Historic Places.
I see.
And if you Google that, find the National Register application, the numbers are in there. So the numbers are out there.
Yeah. So Dan, are there any restrictions? Did you have to get permission to search for these because it was in a national marine sanctuary, or were you just able to do it?
So far, they have not put any restrictions on searching in the sanctuary. I don't see how they could.
Yeah, well, I've heard that some of the new sanctuaries, they're talking about requiring permit before you do, and that's been a number of people on the sanctuary public, community committees have pushed against that successfully. So,
oh yeah,
so far it looks good.
I guess my issue with that is how do you define searching for a shipwreck? With these hull-mounted side scan sonars, no, I'm out fishing. See my fishing gear here? I'm not looking for a shipwreck.
That's exactly right. I feel the same way about it. I think that you know, if I have a sonar on my boat, I could find a shipwreck just with a hull mounted transducer. I don't have to tow anything. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
it is silly when they do that. But so Dan, those are some amazing finds. I really appreciate you sharing those with us tonight.
Oh, my pleasure.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. Wonder if anyone has any questions for Dan. I've got somebody is asking if there's a steeple compound engine on a wreck in the Straits. I think there probably is. They're not unheard of, but they're far less common than triple expansions, as I understand it.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm familiar with. What wreck it would be in the Straits, I really couldn't say.
Yeah. So
see my face getting cool.
Any other questions? Somebody saying Choctaw and Andasti had shoebox cargo holds. So once the outer hull was compromised, they were going to go down. The crew just abandoned them without hesitation. I guess that's probably correct.
I'm trying to think. I don't think I saw any in the video that we have of that. John, the Johns and Dave Cedarberg shot video of that in 2018, including inside one of the cargo holds. And I don't believe there was any. Looking back, I have hull plans of that, and I don't believe there were any conventional ballast tanks on the side. So, yeah, there was no. As he says, once the hull's compromised, they're going down. No question about it.
Definitely. Well, I want to remind everybody, again, feel free to ask questions of Dan if you want to, that we have a Zoom room tonight, and it's going to start at 8:15. Now, I have to apologize. I did not maintain my paid Zoom subscription, so the room is limited to 40 minutes. If people want to continue on after that, well, we could do a second Zoom room, but I'm limited to 40 minutes. But we will do a Zoom room with your favorite adult beverage at 8:15. So, Dan, what's next for you? Do you have anything you want to share? Yeah. Are you still looking for wrecks?
Yeah. We did probably my most extensive wreck hunting this past summer. We covered, more than 50 square miles of Lake Superior looking for a wreck.
Wow.
So as shipwreck hunters like to say, we know a lot of places where it isn't. But late in the season, we did find one more piece of information, which put together with another piece of information, and the places that we've looked already and the projections we did of where it should have come from, depending on where the debris came ashore. It all matches up, and I'm highly confident that we'll find it this next summer. We found this late in the season, and I think we had one good day of weather, and everybody involved had commitments, so we just didn't get out. And next thing you know, it's gales of November, gales of September and October. So
you heard it here, folks. Dan's going to find a new wreck. He's going to have an announcement for us next year.
I sure hope so. I'm going to jinx myself by being this confident. But.
Well, I'm going to get my tickets now for your talk at Gales. Discovery.
Yeah, it maybe a Zoom ticket. I hope not by then.
Well, we are just about out of time. I just want to take a few minutes to do some housekeeping things. First of all, before I do that, Dan, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyable talk with you, as always, of course, because we're not able to meet in person and not able to go to our events. So thanks so much for doing this.
Well, it was fun doing it. I like telling the stories, and they're mostly true stories besides. So. But yeah, I'm sticking around for the Zoom room. This will give me time to hit the head and get a tall, cold adult beverage in the appropriate glass. I think I've got a.
Hey, I'll have to get my old ghost ships. I've got a whole cupboard full of them. But anyway, a couple of other things then. Yes, do come for the Zoom room, everybody. It is posted on the group. It's got a link. It's got a password, a few other things. It's my personal Zoom room. So please do join us next time for Kim Stabelfelt. I still have to meet with him one last time and go through a few things, but we won't have any shortage of things to talk about. He's done so much.
Yeah.
That'll be next week's guest. And then, if you have any thoughts about future presenters, if you yourself may want to be on the show, feel free to contact me. This show will be uploaded to YouTube. And so, our group is a private group, and I've posted why that is. And so if you wanted to share this outside of this group on your, other favorite Facebook groups, you can share the copy that I'm going to upload to YouTube. And all episodes of Great Lakes Shipwrecks Live are on YouTube on the Great Lakes Shipwreck Research Group's YouTube page. You can feel free to join if you want to. I post regular content up there in the form of videos, and I've got all of the past episodes, and it's sort of a documentary history of all of the who's who of people who are doing kind of cool and interesting stuff on the Great Lakes. So Dan, thank you again for being a really fascinating guest, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody in the Zoom room.
Thanks for having me. See you guys in the Zoom room.
Good night, everybody.